Welcome to Om Times TV, a division of Om Times Media and Broadcasting. Sex is the life force energy that runs through us all. The link between sex, creativity, and the sense of aliveness is strong. Can you use sexual energy for your spiritual evolution? Or perhaps for emotional healing? Is it even possible? Clinical sexologist Dr. Martha Tara Lee will explore all these and more on the Eros Evolution Show here on Om Times Radio and TV.
Hello, and welcome to Eros Evolution. This is where we talk about all things related to sex, spirituality, and more. So, International Women's Day is next week, and I have with me two amazing women here. So, I think it's less about gender, but there are certain things that happens to us as women. And so this week I have two guests who are born in a female body. And next week I will have two of my male friends talking about what it's like being male for them. So it's not true that being a woman, I only want to talk about women's issues. I definitely love and adore men as well. And I feel that they also need to have their voice heard. So today I have with me Justine Ang Fonte, a sex educator based in New York City, and your friendly ghostwriter on Instagram. So you can find Justine at Instagram. That's I with the alphabet M, Justine AF, and the ghostwriting Instagram is _good.bice with a S. And I also have with me Mel. So the only rose among the thorns, and one of the co-hosts of a podcast I was on recently called the Balut Kiki Project Podcast. So this podcast was awarded the best podcast host of 2021 last year by Asia Podcast Festival. And so I approached them, and I was on one of the episodes. You can check it out. So it's an award-winning podcast, and that podcast actually aims to normalize difficult conversations around depression, mental health, gender identity, human sexuality, and everything in between. So Mel is ordinary Filipina, finding her own way through the world and battling depression, anxiety with the help of a psychiatrist and therapist. So with her co-host, they share stories around for people so that they feel that they're not alone and they don't have to be alone on their journeys. So you can find out more about Mel's podcast at bulutkiki.com. That's BALUT kiki.com. Is also the Balut Kiki Project on Facebook and Instagram, and Balut Kiki Prog on Twitter. So welcome to the show. So tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you are right now, what time it is.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. It's such a pleasure to be with you. As you said, Dr. Lee, we were together at a podcast a few weeks ago, and that was that was a really good conversation. So like you said, I am Mel. I'm currently in Europe. I'm in the UK, so it is currently nighttime where I am. 1:07 a.m. So I'm here with you with coffee. Thank you for that really good introduction.
Oh,
Yes, I look forward to having this conversation today.
thank you. Thanks for making it.
Yes,
Yeah, staying awake.
I took a nap.
I'm coming in from DC. I'm in Washington DC right now, the belly of the beast, doing my second stop of my speaking tour, but I'm originally based in New York City.
Cool. What time is it over there at the moment?
It's 8 p.m. So
8
just had
p.m.
dinner and I'm still very awake.
Oh, yeah. So it's 9 a.m. In Singapore. So thank you so much for being here. Maybe you can talk a little bit about, since we're talking about International Women's Day, do you feel that we have achieved gender equality, at least maybe in the city that you're in, or your background, your upbringing? Like, what have you seen in the changes of being women?
Go ahead, Mel.
Okay. I think we are not where we want to be. We are not where we need to be, but we've definitely achieved and moved forward from maybe 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. We certainly have seen changes and improvements, but there's still a lot to do. There's still a lot of things to do and goals to achieve. Where I am now, there's currently a strike in the school system for gender pay gap because female um, female tutors, female teachers are earning a bit less than their male counterparts. So there is currently a strike in several universities in the union of teachers. So that tells us something.
I agree with Mel. I think the bar is really low at looking at what improvement looks like when it comes to
Yeah.
gender parity. But I believe that so long as there is still transphobia, homophobia, and men don't feminize something as valuable, that we aren't going to achieve gender parity. I think a lot of times people think about gender equity as something that women now have some type of power or equal power. But I would like to think of it as, do men feel like they can sacrifice some of their power in order to uplift women's voices? And that is something I have yet to see. So yes, men are still up there and women are rising to meet them, but are men willing to actually let go of some of that power and privilege so that we can really achieve gender parity? And that is not the case. And gender roles are the root of transphobia and homophobia. And there are still countries where it is illegal to be out as a queer person. So no, we
Yeah.
are nowhere near equity in this world.
Yeah, just as you say, I feel a bit like crying because what happened was yesterday there was an announcement from the High Court saying that they're not going to remove the 377A law in Singapore, which actually criminalizes homosexual sex. So they say, oh, we are not going to remove it, but we are not going to penalize it. We're not going to enforce it. So once again, it's making a mockery of our law system, and it's still there. It's like a sword over people's heads of saying that yeah, you just be there, and we're not going to give you rights. We're not
Right.
going to protect you. And it has been very triggering for the GLBT community here in Singapore. And yeah, so they have all kinds of announcements about the support system and the helplines that are available. But I love what you're saying, Justine, because like what you mentioned, Mel, about UK people having a strike. In Singapore, you can't have a strike. In Singapore, even though there is still a gender pay gap, it's not really acknowledged or talked about. And I like what you said, Justine, about how people who have the power and privilege may not want to release it, may want to protect it. And so they may be in denial and saying there's nothing wrong with what's happening because they just don't see the discrimination that is existing. I think it was yesterday or the day before, I got a message from just some random guy on Instagram saying I should stop making videos for She the People TV, which is a female empowerment website by Indian women for Indian women. And I happen to be privileged to be able to share content with them, even though I'm not Indian. I do have a very big heart for India and Indians because I have so many clients from India. And so to have this message saying you should stop contributing to them, you should stop perpetuating their propaganda, I think it's definitely coming from a place of privilege and wanting to send women back to the Stone Ages. So it's very infuriating seeing this happening. And when I think one of the biggest things about being a woman for me is that I really hate the fact that I'm smaller and I'm weaker, and I always feel the threat of violence. So I have to think twice before I say anything. I can't retaliate the same way men may not think about their physical safety, whereas this is something that's always at the back of my mind. Do you all agree with that?
Absolutely. Um, I live I live in student halls or dormitories, and I have to walk to school about half a mile. The and then around the area there's a grocery and shopping center, and there's a path to the shopping center. There are two ways. One is a very well lit road, but it's longer, and there's a shorter road, but it's a bit dark. It's a bit dingy, and I would never take that road at night. Even if it goes around the police station, I would never take that road at night. I would rather go the long way. And I don't think, you're right, Dr. Lee, I don't think men ever think about this. But we do. It's like, it's almost like stuck in our heads that we always have to think about that.
And if we
And
don't think about it and something happens, it's our fault.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. The fear is real. I think, as someone in the dating world and on dating apps, I know that, a straight man's biggest fear going on the actual date in person is that I'm fatter than my pictures. My
Mm,
biggest fear when I meet him in person is that I'm going to be raped. It's a
yeah,
very different,
very different. That's
feeling
true.
going into a first date when you're thinking your physical safety is imminently going to be threatened, and he's thinking about something superficial that your pictures don't match who you actually look like.
Absolutely. That's so true. I think safeties, like from the onset, since we were kids, safety has always been something that has been drilled into our heads. And sadly, we're doing. I'm doing it to my niece. My sister's doing it to her daughter. That we're thinking that how do we keep her safe? How does she keep herself safe when she grows up to be a teenager and as an adult?
And I think that those are important things to do, but we need to be focusing on how we're raising our boys to not be rapists.
Yes.
I mean, the
Yes, that's
onus
where
is
it
not
is.
on us to get self
Yeah,
defense classes, to say no
yeah,
louder. It's about training our boys to be
to be
nurturing,
respectful.
to be
Hmm.
compassionate, to be empathetic caregivers. That should not be something that is only socialized to girls.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about what's going on in the last 2 years with what's happening with Asian hate crime, especially because of COVID? Like, has any of this affected us as women or as Asians?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, even BC before coronavirus, we had always, been experiencing discrimination. It's just that now there's this added layer of this virus that's attached to, the continent of Asia. So then Asian Americans, at least in my experience, are now even more stigmatized for this layer. Where, before it was always go back to China, you don't belong here. Now it's go back to China because you've infected all of us. So it's not any different. I think there's just more visibility, and in fact, it's hyper visible. And I think the problem with that for especially Asian Americans is that people shouldn't care about our welfare because it's in the context of tragedy. And that's when they start caring about us is when people are getting pushed down the subway tracks, women are getting stabbed on their way home, and they all happen to be Asian or they're going to work that day. We've always been marginalized because of how people see specifically Asian women as a fetish, as something exotic. So we've never been humanized and have always been objectified and dehumanized as something that is in this world for the pleasure and in service of men. So the coronavirus, really just amplified what we've already been experiencing for long years in history.
How about you, Mel? Have you had any experiences?
No. I'm not looking forward to having that experience. But no. Um, but you see it in the news. My aunt in the US had a friend who got yelled at, go back to China, at the start of the pandemic. They were on the freeway, and someone on the freeway, someone yelled at them to go back to China. And it's just dumb. It's just really dumb.
Hmm. So just to be clear, none of us are actually from China, but we are getting this
Exactly.
abuse because we are Asian.
Exactly.
And
Right.
I also get my fair share of it, and I was really shocked by it because I'm Chinese, I'm Singaporean Chinese, born and bred in Singapore. I am Chinese, but it's like my parents came from my grandparents came from China. So what happened was that yeah, so on my platform on She the People TV, people say boycott China, and so it's not to say like we are better than people from China. That's not what we're saying at all. But the fact
Mm-hmm.
that suddenly all Asians are just dumped into this
One
target of
label.
hate. And it's really scary. Like I read what's happening in the US of people getting stabbed and killed and pushed down a subway into the path of subway trains. And it's terrifying, because I happen to be in a place where I'm in the majority, so it feels really safe. But we all have our privileges as well. So I like to ask, like, it's like really kind of depressing and upsetting talking about this even. But do we have any suggestions of how women can cope?
I always think that being in spaces with people of shared identities is something that can be really affirming, especially as an Asian American, where I'm usually, the only one, or there's really, not a lot of us. And so when I enter a space when there is the majority, when I'm the majority, it really makes a difference on my mental health, on being, seen and having to being able to just go right into sharing, knowing that they all have 100 feet head start into the conversation because they get it. There's a shared experience there, as opposed to being around people who don't share those identities. I have to start from the beginning and try to defend and explain myself, oftentimes be gaslit in the process, and it's taxing, and that's not supportive at all. So I think one continual form of healing for me is seeing and being around support groups of people with shared identities. And those types of affinity spaces have been very beneficial for me.
I agree. And it's very important to have, not just be in them, but to put up these safe spaces,
Mhm.
so that it's available to everyone.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the university where I'm in, we have a BAME society. While it's not specifically for women, but it is for minorities. And so, like you said, when you're with this group, when you're with your peers, you have the same experience, same background, or similar. It is a safe feeling. It really does help. It absolutely
Mhm.
does.
Because it's tiring, explaining yourself to people who don't get it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and they don't, I don't want to say most of the time, but they don't listen with an open mind. They
Mhm.
already have a preconceived idea that this is it or that is that, and our explanation falls on deaf ears because there's already a preconceived notion, an answer before the question.
I would
Yeah.
also say, anything you can do to set boundaries on the amount of time or people that you are spending your energy on is something that we need to be more intentional on. I think a lot of Asian femmes, have really been socialized to serve, to be subservient, and to be there in the for service of other people, and to be that
Mhm.
caring. And when we give so much of ourselves, we don't leave anything else for our own, bodies, to nurture it and to really care for it. I think self care is something that is not something we practice, and it's not something we were taught to practice or be comfortable with. So whether it's protecting your energy by actually unfriending people on social media that you don't want to see on your feed or have them see in your feed, actually saying no to a brunch you don't want to go to because those people are, you know, exhausting to you, but we always feel obligated or feel guilty or will feel bad if we don't just say yes. And I think we need to be comfortable with yes, and people need to be honoring those boundaries and not seeing as like a rejection or some type of cancellation on their friendship, but really this person cares about their own well-being, and I don't want to hang out with them if they don't really want to hang out with me. So why are we always settling for mediocre, hangouts?
That oh gosh, I'm still struggling with that, to be honest. I really am. Where I learned in another podcast episode, which will soon air, where we're trained to be taught to be compassionate to others but not to ourselves, and being compassionate to ourselves is so difficult, um, because that's all we know. That's what we were taught, to serve others, to please others in every shape or form, be it the one cleaning the house and doing all the household chores and being okay with that,
Mhm.
and being supportive of everyone around us. But what about ourselves? And it's,
Right.
we're compassionate to others, we give them everything we have, we
Mhm.
don't leave some for us.
Right.
Yeah. So I love all the things that you are saying, Justine and Mel. So we're talking about community, finding people with shared experiences. We talked about how we are always subject to this attitude of serving and nurturing and taking care of people, and really we need to direct it towards ourselves and learning to speak up, assert ourselves, and not just settle. So actually, a memory comes to mind. When I was growing up, my mom would always push me out of the kitchen and say, you go study. And it was almost as if the most important thing was to study. And so when I grew up, I actually didn't have a good connection with food, with all the chores of acts of daily living. Like I didn't really know how to cook. I didn't think it was important. It was seen as something that was lesser than, like, I'm not supposed to be doing this. And so I think it became the reverse of it, because then I had this identity kind of confusion, like what am I supposed to do as a woman, because I've been pushed out of the kitchen all the time and I'm only supposed to study and be smart and just like prove myself. But I live in this world, I still need to navigate it, I still need to learn how to take care of myself. And so I think that is an element of well intentionality, and then actually having the opposite effect, because I had to take time to heal my relationship with food and cooking and what it actually means being a woman or a modern day woman. So have you all had these kinds of similar experiences?
For me, it's the complete opposite. Being the eldest and being a woman, the expectation was growing up that I was always in the kitchen, which I was. Um, Took care of my younger siblings as that was the expectation, right? From the eldest, and was the one doing the cleaning, was the one helping around the house. Don't get me wrong, helping around and learning chores is it's a very important life skill. But also it needs to be balanced, right? We need to also know that we are more than that. Personally, I am quite thankful that I have very strong female role models in the family. Um, I was never told that I couldn't be anything. That I wanted to be an archaeologist. My parents were okay with that. I wanted to be a mad scientist. My parents were happy with that. It was all up to me. So I recognize that I'm quite lucky that I do have strong female roles in my family and in my life. But that's not always the case.
Yeah, I'm really blessed too. I have, I was raised with parents who wanted me to, take on what my passion was, but also be ladylike in doing so. So I would say if I have to pick apart a little bit about how I was raised, that maybe I would do differently. Is not pushing those gender norms from something as menial as the way I laughed as a kid. I mean, the way I laugh now, even as an adult. But my parents would, tell me that's not ladylike. You have to laugh with your mouth closed, and you have to cover your mouth when you're laughing. It's more polite that way. And I was a very rambunctious, energetic kid, and I was very athletic. So I would always be racing against the boys and trying to beat the boys and beating the boys. But, as I developed muscles, I was told you don't want your arms to be too big, then you'll look like a tomboy. So there's something negative about that. And so I remember, I think I was in 4th grade, my parents put me in manners for minors, which was me and 3 9-year-old boys in this etiquette class about what I'm supposed to wear, what utensils I'm supposed to use at fancy dinners, how I'm supposed to speak properly. But there were no other girls there because we were supposed to just know that from birth and, be able to do it well. But I was a little bit of a rebel in some ways in that regard, not being ladylike enough. And so that was just something that was ingrained in me at an early age. But, even now, there are some messages from my family about, my arms being too muscular, and that's not ladylike. Or, the way I'm dressing, it's not, dainty enough. And so, that's still there. It doesn't have any strong ramifications, in ways that, other body image things have, especially on young girls. But there's a reason that they're still thinking in these very patriarchal terms. Even the matriarchs in our family, who are extremely successful and the breadwinners in their family, yet they have to do that being ladylike.
Yeah, that's triggering a lot in me. I can go on about it, but yes, we all have our stories, how we were wounded being women. For me, I was told that I shouldn't be so loud. I should be mindful. I'm a woman. I shouldn't say this. I shouldn't do this. So I really hated being a woman. So on that note, we have a commercial break. We'll be back.
Times TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
Hi everyone, we are back, and I am with Mel from Balut Kiki Project, which is a podcast you can look up, and Justine, who is a sex educator in New York City. Mel is at the moment in the UK. So we are 3 Asian women, and just now before the break, we were talking about what it's like growing up as Asian women or women, and how we can cope with gender inequality and build ourselves up, including finding communities, learning how to take care of ourselves and not settle. So one of the things that I really want to ask is, because all of us, all 3 of us, are some kind of a public figure in some way. We are all sex educators in some way, or at least we are women who talk about sex. And so have you experienced any slut shaming, and what are some of the strategies ways that you learn to cope, because I think to some extent all of us do experience slut shaming.
Go ahead, Mel.
um, over the years, sadly, I've developed thick skin, like really thick skin, because I get it. It happens even from the family. Um, for those who know me, I have big boobs, and even that gets called out. It's me. There's nothing I can do about it. That's my own physical body. That's what I was given, and it's not my fault. Um, but growing up, it felt like it was a problem. Like having two eyes is a problem, right? But so I just developed thick skin, and it's sad. Now thinking about it, that I have to do that. That I have to keep thinking to myself, in one ear, out the other, or just it won't kill me, and just ignore people. It's not always easy to do. Until now, it's not easy to do, but that's I guess how I've coped. Definitely not the best way, but that's how I learned to deal with it.
I personally have never been slut shamed, but I have been shamed for being a woman in the sex education field. And it's slightly different, but I think the stigma is quite similar in that being in the sexuality field, being a sexual being is wrong and is negative and isn't something you should be proud of. And in this smear campaign that I was at the center of last year for being a sex educator in school spaces, talking to children from grades 1 to 11 about various topics in sex, many conservatives were very uncomfortable with the fact that this was something I was bringing into school spaces. And one way I coped was really letting them finish throwing their tantrum. They are clearly projecting a lot of their own pain, their own unhealed traumas from their past histories. And they just chose, an Asian woman during Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the United States to as their target at the time. It's nothing new. It's just that I was, 2021's target on putting blame to them not having done the inner work to heal from their own sexual traumas and violence, and really just projecting that discomfort on the scapegoat. And I happen to be that person. So that really helped me to not just be forgiving, but I feel like it takes up less energy to be forgiving than to be angry. I really was never angry at, the critics of my work. I felt really sorry for them. In the same way that I'm catcalled in New York City, I don't get angry. I get annoyed, and then I feel really sorry for that person because they haven't maybe had a matriarch, in their life, to be able to see that they are someone worth respecting. They haven't been as privileged as I am to be able to study gender, and gender scripts in a way that I have. And so I feel bad for them that this is what their behaviors are reduced to by taking another human being and objectifying them, even if they're a complete stranger, and definitely not, with my consent. And I feel bad for them because they're going to struggle with their relationships, or already are struggling with their relationships, where I feel very confident in my fulfilled relationships because I have people that see me as an actual human being. So a lot of my coping when I have shame or hate thrown my way is really trying to understand what makes a person this angry, what makes a person this cruel to another human. And then the grace and the forgiveness comes out from that, because no one is born hating. They were taught that. And that's who I feel sorry for, the people who are students of those teachings.
That
Yeah,
that's sorry. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead, Mel.
And what people don't realize is it doesn't help the situation. It doesn't make the person the object of the shaming. It doesn't make them change. It doesn't make them not do, what they perceive is wrong. That doesn't happen. We just did an episode on slut shaming the other week. And our guest, she even in elementary school, she was already being slut shamed by her teachers, by the principal. Elementary, when she didn't know what sex was. And it comes from adults who have malicious ideas, projecting them to children who have no clue.
Right.
And it starts there, and it just continues, and it becomes pervasive. Other students learn it, other teachers learn it and think it, and it it's more damaging than anything. And it doesn't help, it doesn't fix anything. It just damages.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Justine, I just want to say that we didn't connect until recently because I saw what was happening in the papers in US, and I was like, who is this person? I don't know her, and she's Asian and she looks like me, and I really wanted to love you and support you, but I can imagine, like, I'm so far away, like who the hell is Martha? And I didn't want to, like, like stress you further when you were going through this storm. But you have my support and my love, and it's really not easy because for me, when I was on my journey of being a sex educator, I had so much shaming. I was told that I was indecent for talking about sex,
Mhm.
and for a long time I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized it's because sex is such a taboo and a topic that's supposed to be personal and behind closed doors. And here's this woman who talks about sex so openly, and she must not have any shame, or she must be a
Right.
slut. So I got a lot of that all through my career, and only in recent years I think people are like celebrating and applauding and my work, and many people coming forward and wanting to talk about sexuality and sexuality education, because I think it comes from a place of wanting to right the wrongs of not having it normalized. So our work is so important, and I like what you said about how you were able to see things from their perspective. You were able to be forgiving and not be angry and feel sorry for them. I think this is exactly what makes you a good educator, because we dig deep into why we do what we do and also who we are doing this for. So it's definitely the inner work and the sense of mission that we all have to go through. So yeah, just keep going and know that no matter what happens, you have my support. And if there's anything I can do ever to help both of you, I will definitely do that. Yeah. So
Thank
anyway,
you, Dr. Lee. I appreciate it.
Thank
yeah, it's
you.
it really sounded like such a terrible time, and I hope like the worst is over, and um, you emerge from it well and graciously. And I only want better things to happen for you moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so on that note, talking about dealing with slut shaming, I think I don't want to belabor the point. I think a lot of people say, oh, just ignore it. I feel it didn't help me. So what I did was I actually do what Justine does, which is um, really see things from their perspective, like who they are, where they're coming from. And it really wasn't easy, but over the years, um, now finally I think I can laugh about it. Finally I can ignore them, I can block them. Like I don't get as upset as I was before, but I think for a good 5 6 years I did get very affected, and it's like this constant a one step forward, two steps back kind of a feeling all the time. And there will be some days that was better than others. But this whole thing about ignoring and developing a thicker skin really didn't come easy for me. So I had to do a lot of like breathing and meditating and dancing and crying and journaling in order to get through all that. And because I'm in Singapore, and there are really not many people who I really feel really understand what I'm going through. I also felt really isolated. So it's really important. I think through this podcast, I've had opportunities to meet with other educators around the world, and that has helped. It's like, you have some reason to connect with people, as opposed to just, I think not a lot of people want to just talk for the sake of talking. So having said all that, let's move on and talk about circle back and talk about how do we as women think that men or all of humanity can support this gender bias and discrimination that continues to exist.
I think for parents around the world, I think they need to care less about what their genitalia is of their child and stop throwing gender reveal parties, because all you're doing is telling a bunch of strangers or family friends what your kids' sex organs are. And so what? Because we know gender identity is something completely different than an assignment that they are getting on their passport or their birth certificate. And all that's doing is keeping them boxed into these ideas of who they're supposed to be and who they're expected to be. And we know that gender roles are the heart of transphobia and homophobia. We want our young people to live in a world where there isn't a closet to have to come out of. They're just born into a safe world who loves them for the gender full world that they're walking into, because gender can look and be so many different things. And yet we've reduced it to two colors, blue and pink. And so I think that's one of the things that we can be doing, that not just men, not just, certain people, but it's all in all of us to really understand that we're trying to get to a gender full world as opposed to a gender binary of two.
And
Yeah,
also
I
just
agree.
not reduce the value of the person to a gender,
Right.
right?
And their
There,
reproductive capacity.
exactly. There's so much more. That is just one part of many parts,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I really don't get this gender reveal thing. I don't think I had all these gender reveal parties growing up. I think they only became like something that was in my radar in the last 3 years. Has it been
Yeah,
going on like longer than it has been, Justine, like
No,
in
it's definitely,
US?
it's on the newer side. I would say maybe about a decade old. But
yeah,
with these sorts of things, you can always thank capitalism, because it's another excuse to
true.
just buy things when there's already probably a baby shower to buy more things, right? It all has to
Exactly.
do with how can we make more money off of something, and that something implying again another box to put people into.
Yeah, we are much, much more than our gender. And also, what if we feel that we were born in the wrong body, and we identify with a different gender than we are assigned at birth? And it can be really, really, really many layers of damage that can be caused. So coming back to how men or all of humanity can support women, I think it's really important to recognize, and I keep repeating this almost every episode, is that we need to look at people as individuals.
Mhm.
We are all unique people with different skills,
Yeah,
talents, abilities. Some people are born strong, some people are interested in supposedly guy things, and we just need to look at them as individuals. So
yeah.
we need to let go of our own biasness of like what people should be, or what someone should look in order to be of value or in order to be of significance. What do you think?
Absolutely, because we are not we are multifaceted individuals. We have interests, we have feelings, we have opinions, we have wants, needs, etc., etc., skills, talents, um, and it's as a whole we are a person. So it's not just your gender, it's not just your genitals that you get. It's everything, and And yeah, it's just one part of it. And Dr. Lee, it's okay to talk about it all the time because it needs to be talked about. We need to keep talking about it until it gets through people's thick skulls.
Yeah.
That it needs to stop.
Yeah, I think my message to cis het men around the world is threefold. Number one, listen to us. Number two, believe us. And number three, shut up and stop talking over us.
I
I
love
like
it.
number
I
three.
love it. Very clear. It's true. It's true. Yeah. Anyway, I have had so many experiences where my values are not respected just because I don't speak as loudly as them or I'm not as aggressive, and everybody should have a voice at the table. I also think that it's really important that men, especially being in a position of privilege, they really need to make sure that we have equal pay and they stand up for us, not just positively discriminate and say, yeah, let's hire women because things will be easier, but actually really seeing us for our abilities and really advocating and really pointing out discrimination that happens at the workplace as well. Because when we speak up, we are troublemakers, but when they speak up, people are more likely to listen, often because they are also the boss. So it's really important that they work on their own biasness and their own lack of education around what we really want. Like, we are at work, we just want to be appreciated for who we are and what we bring to the table as workers, as a professional, and not being treated as, oh yeah, she's like that because she's on her period, or like making excuses for us. Like, we want to be treated as an equal at the workplace.
Mhm. And you mentioned a very good word, and I really, really like that word, which is advocate, because that is what we need to do for each other. Because we don't need people to do stuff just for the sake of doing it, right? Like meeting a gender equality target. That's not it, right? That doesn't represent the whole picture. I think it just covers the problem, or it's just a tick in the box. It needs to be more than just a tick in the box. People need to advocate for each other.
Yeah, thank you for all that. So yeah, we've covered quite a bit of ground. So I wanted to actually mention that this year, for International Women's Day, the theme is actually break the bias. And so on the 8th of March, which is in next week, they actually have a symbol of where you cross your arms and say, like, we are for breaking the bias. But what actually are we talking about? Like, what kind of bias? Are we just talking about gender bias? Are we talking about bias because of pay discrimination? What do you think? What are the other bias that comes up for you?
I think it's not just gender. There's a lot of different biases, and it can be like so I think the very common, the loudest one is gender bias. It can be not just female, male, the binary gender, but it can be, for example, we talked about in our podcast, we talk about in the Philippines where there's a notion that if you are gay, you must be creative. Therefore, you will be assigned all the creative parts in a project. That's not necessarily true. Um, or for example, if you are male identifying, you will be the one who will always be carrying the heavy things and lugging heavy things around. That's not always true. So there is bias across the board from everyone, and I think we need to really just take a step back and just take the person as a whole. Short, tall, Asian, not in every color of the rainbow.
I would say that because we still live in a patriarchal world, the bias for many people is that masculinity is superior. And that is why even women try to take on masculine aspects of their identities, because they think that that is what's going to push them forward and be successful. And I think we need to start understanding that there is value to femininity, and we need to actually value what we feminize, as opposed to seeing femininity as something negative and weak and bad and not sought after. Because so long as we keep thinking femininity is something negative, there isn't going to be any gender equity. And we know any human being can be both feminine and masculine, and that needs to be stuff that we accept in every person. But we put this bias saying the more masculine you are, whatever we've socially constructed that to mean, is where success is and where good is and where progress is. Where we know that it's so toxic that it's actually regressive.
I love it. And you're so right. I'm so in agreement with you, because a lot of people do not understand what femininity and masculinity really mean. They just peg it to the gender, when in reality it is something that I feel all of us need to make peace within ourselves. We need to navigate this, and we need to bring out different facets of ourselves in different situations. So this whole misconception around like, oh, I am a woman, but I don't want to be feminine, or femininity is weak. Like, we need education around what masculinity and femininity really means. So when it comes to bias, I'm also thinking of a bias around gender roles, like what women should do, should wear, should look. I'm also thinking of around our sexuality as a bias, like women who are talking about sex, or women who are sex positive, or women who are sexually expressive are sluts. So all this labeling is also another bias. So as a sex educator, I'm also seeing like this bias around like orgasm pleasure gap that also needs to be talked about, like women deserving of pleasure less, or it's not as important as if if they're in a hetero relationship, then if their male partner has an orgasm, like it's more important for them to be satisfied. I think these are some of the bias that comes to mind. Can you think of anything else?
You just mentioned, right, for women who are comfortable with their sexuality, they're labeled as sluts, but for men, they're called studs. That alone shows you, says a lot of things, doesn't it?
Yes. So when I was going through my sexuality education, sex school, when I was going through sex school, it was impressed upon us that a slut is simply just somebody who has more sex than you. Like, you are triggered because you have less sex than this person, and so then you just label this person a slut. So if I need to hold the cross of being a slut so that I can help more people, then so be it. So I had to claim the word slut and really embrace this as a shadow word, and really make peace with it, so that I don't get triggered when this comes up invariably through my work. So having done that word around work around the word slut, I don't get so affected anymore. So yeah, we talked about so many things today. We talked about gender equality, what it means in the modern day. We talked about what it means being Asian, and we talked about navigating our experiences being a modern day woman, and slut shaming, how to deal with it, how men or all of humanity can actually support women. And we talked about some of the biasness that we hope will be broken. So I want to give one last shout out to all of you. So maybe you can share once again your social media links.
Thank you. So again, I'm Mel, one of the co-hosts of the Balut Kiki Project Podcast. You can find us at www.balutkiki.com.
I'm Justine Fonte, sex educator. You can find my Instagram at I'm Justine AF, and I'm also your friendly ghostwriter on Instagram, helping you set boundaries for people in your life by helping you write those text messages and pressing send. And that's at _good_buys_.
And thank you very much for being here. So this is Martha. You can find me at eroscoaching.com, and you can find the Eros Evolution Show on Facebook and Instagram. So so thanks for being here. And next week we have two men talking about what it means being men, and we talk about toxic masculinity. So this has been Martha, and this has been Eros Evolution.
Thank you.